Good morning, Amiee. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Alexis. I am relaxed and happy. How are you?
Good. I am very excited to dive into our 2022 forecast. There's a lot going on. It's very exciting. And I think sometimes it's nice to look at the year overall. So that's what we're gonna dive into today.
Yeah, that sounds great. We're coming out of this big 2021 year where our major theme was the Saturn Uranus square, the old versus the new. And I think back to an Instagram live you and I did back in 2020, where we were just going and you're like, there's going to be a war between the old and the new. And that's that's what 2020 ended up being. So what are you feeling is the overall theme for 2022?
Yes. Yeah. And just to touch into 2021, you're right. Like, I think that was a big theme that we had mentioned at the start was that Saturn Uranus square, which they hit 3 times exact in 2021. And there was a big Aquarius theme. Like, Aquarius was very loud for 2021. We had Jupiter in Aquarius, who always expands wherever he's at. So he always kind of is that energy. And he was in Aquarius for most of the year. And then we had that kind of rare occurrence in February where we had, I think it was 6 planets in Aquarius, which doesn't happen all the time. And so Aquarius itself was kind of a theme with that Saturn Uranus square for 2021 of the revolutionary and the thinking in new ways. And how can we go forward, right? And you hear a lot of people saying like the new normal, because we've kind of had to, with all of the, change that's happened, we've had to, okay, what is the new normal for us? And so that was a big part of 2021 was exactly that Saturn Uranus square, which will still be there for 2022. It doesn't hit exact like it did in 2021. So they hit exact squares 3 times. They'll be in a looser square, but still aspecting within a few degrees for most of 2022. So we're not done with that. We're still in the like the aftermath of that, of still feeling into that old versus new. But as we move forward into 2022, it's a completely different feel when you look at it. The big theme that I'm feeling for 2022 is this Jupiter Neptune conjunction in Pisces, which is really, really like just, there's a few, I mean, we're gonna go into it. We're gonna talk all about it, but they're both rulers of Pisces. So Jupiter and Neptune are the traditional and modern rulers of Pisces. So you have both of the rulers home in Pisces. And when Jupiter and Neptune come together, it's magic. And as we'll go into more of it, but it's magic. And it's really this like infinite possibility energy. And then to have them home in Pisces, that hasn't happened since 1856. So this is definitely a once in a lifetime aspect. That's definitely what I'm feeling for 2022.
That's beautiful. It's amazing. I was just looking at one of my notes that has to do with 1857. We'll get to that. Yes, I'm feeling Jupiter moving into Pisces, which we are actually recording this on December 28th, and he moves into Pisces tonight to start his journey. So there's that like feeling of excitement. The other thing I'm really keeping my eye on is that Venus hits her star point in Capricorn in early December. So that feels like an initiation point. And we will go into more of Venus, but she has five signs where she has a star point, and Capricorn is one of those signs. And right now she's retrograde in Capricorn. She's going to be hitting that star point at 18 degrees of Capricorn. I don't have the date off the top of my head right now. I think it's pretty early in the month. And so there's this initiation point. 5 of our founding fathers of the United States were Masons. They were astrologers, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to fucking break it to you, white men. They were astrologers. And they were really intentional in the way that they set up the United States birth chart, including when the president got inaugurated. Everything is set up astrologically. The city of Washington, D.C. is actually set up with major buildings in the constellation of Virgo, the priestess. Is anybody paying attention here? I'm gonna get ranty already. I can feel it. So this star point, back to the founding fathers, why the star point matters is that 5 of them were Venus star point babies. And there's power in these initiation points. And so we've got the Venus star point. The other thing I'm very excited about is the nodal axis shift that happens on January 18th. When we shift out of Sagittarius Gemini and into Scorpio Taurus. And we definitely went on a little journey with that in our most recent Capricorn season podcast. And Taurus is earth and Scorpio is water. Those are the feminine elements. And there feels like there's so much healing possible for our bodies and for our earth and how we relate to that Scorpio piece of what is hidden. And is it that it's private or that it's secret? Because those are 2 different things, and it requires discernment to understand that, the difference between secrecy and privacy. And privacy is important. We've, we are in this, like, everything's public. Everybody knows everything about everything. And we don't need to do that. We can have private lives and be public and be in alignment. So I'm excited to see how the Scorpio Taurus axis with the nodal shift works with that and plays with that. While Pisces and Neptune are cohabitating, they've set up as roommates. They're going to be sharing a space, and Neptune bringing that expansion to, once again, what we've been being called to see since 2020, that we are all so interconnected. We need to stop with the, like, I'm separate, this is separate. We're all the same thing.
Yeah. And that is a very Piscean idea, that idea of like unity and oneness. So yeah, I think we'll get a lot more of that in 2022, just even what that means for ourselves, for our connection to other people. But often, and this is what I felt for a while, of in order to have unity, you have to have the division. Like, I feel like there's going to be greater division before we can move towards unity. And so I think this will just be a big shift in that, right? And it might not look like rainbows and butterflies, and most likely it won't. But it doesn't mean that, I mean, that's collectively too that I'm speaking, but it doesn't mean that in our lives we can't have the amazing things, because I think that is a big piece of Jupiter and Neptune coming together, of like things that we can't even imagine happening that are beautiful, right? And so that can happen. And also just, one of the shadow sides of Pisces and Neptune too is getting caught in the fantasy and illusion. And so to not lose fact, that groundedness of, yeah, there might be some things that don't look so pretty, and there might be some really uncomfortable pieces, and collectively there might be things that look like a complete mess. But whenever you're creating something new, the old needs to be broken, right? Like, I think of that idea of, if you have a vase and it breaks, like, you can't put something bigger in a vase that was, right? Like, in order to put something bigger in it, you need to get a new vase. So that old vase needs to go away, either get broken or, right, destroyed or something. And so there's like that too, of not getting caught in the fantasy and the illusion, like being really realistic about things, without losing that optimism, right? Which can be challenging, but Jupiter is an optimistic planet. So I think we'll be in good hands. But it's both. It's both.
It is both. I'm gonna just bring up episode 5, which is our cosmic cocktail party. Alexis spoke earlier about what happened last February 2021, with the stellium that took place. We called it the cosmic cocktail party. If you want to go back and give that a listen, and if you're a person that journals, have a look at your journal and see if there's been themes that have carried through for 2021, and see if there's threads that you see have gotten resolved or that have maybe gotten louder with the Saturn Uranus square because they just went exact for the third time on the 24th. So I'm going to point you back towards episode 5. And then I'm also going to point you back with the this idea of division. We did a great episode with our friend and colleague Becca Honeycutt, episode 18, where she really spoke about what this division feels like to her, and this war between love and hate, this idea of we're divided, and how moving through that division can bring us to unity if we can just expand and shed and shift enough, if we can want it enough. Like for me, it really feels like, do we want a different way of being?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I think that brings us to, we'll go through everything chronologically and kind of go through the year in chunks. So we'll kind of focus on the first quarter.
Giddy up.
And then we'll go through, because there's a lot to get into. And I think holding, some of those themes that we just spoke of, there will be an unfolding as we go through each piece. So we already started talking about Jupiter, but just to go into more detail. So Jupiter, as you mentioned, enters Pisces December 28th, the end of 2021, and he will be there through December 20th, 2022. Now he dips into Aries for a chunk of time from May through the end of October because of retrogrades and the way he moves. He'll move into Aries and then retrograde back into Pisces. So he'll be in Aries for a good amount of time. That's longer than normally. Like if we look at this past year, he only spent a few months in Pisces when he dipped out of Aquarius. So again, so he'll be in Pisces for the majority of the year, but dipping into Aries May through the end of October. And he also dips into Aries in the middle of an eclipse portal. So he enters Aries in the middle of an eclipse portal. So it's right in between the two eclipses in the spring. And then when he comes back into Pisces, it's during another eclipse portal.
I love it.
So on both ends, he's like switching signs in a very potent energy. Like it's very interesting that those are both the times that he moves in. And also that first dip into when he moves into Aries is during Mercury retrograde too. So it has a very introspective kind of energy. And then Aries is about beginning. It's about that spark initiating. So it feels like that supports the dreams and the right potential of Pisces to help us not get lost in it. We dip into Aries and it's like, okay, and then what would that look like? What would we need to start? What would we need to kind of get going in order for those things to happen? And then he moves back into Pisces the end of October to finish the year out in Pisces. So that has a really good feel to me too. It's like, it's not getting too lost in Pisces because that is the area he's expanding. So yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. Yes, Jupiter moving into taking this sojourn through Pisces, moving into Aries really does. Aries, we're action. We Aries. I'm gonna talk about Aries because I'm an Aries sun and we like action. We will get up from the middle of doing whatever we're doing and we will go dismantle our office and clean it. Because that is an Aries signature. It's what can we go do? And Jupiter feels like he's going to be bringing expansion to, I just spent this time in Pisces. I just spent this time expanding us into the realization that we could have unity. And then I'm going to move into Aries and invite you to take some action towards unity, towards actually moving yourself, whether it's moving towards your inner unity or moving towards a level of outer unity with the world around you. there's going to be, for me, with this Jupiter in Aries, what action are you taking? And I'm going to expand on those actions. They may be small, just micro moments, baby steps. And Jupiter is going to be like, okay, you take that baby step and I'm going to expand on it. Because Aries is also the baby of the zodiac. It's, if we relate it to the body, it's the head, because in a standard birth procedure, the head is the first thing that emerges. And if we relate it to the lifetime, it's the youngest stages of a human life. It's when everything is new and fresh and we're learning to move. Who am I? And who am I is that we're amazing pieces of cosmos. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in the meat suit. we're amazing pieces of cosmos held in amazing meat suits. And this is that Aries piece. And I feel like he can bring a lot of expansion to that and how we want to take action. And then he's going to bring us back and we're going to revisit Pisces, and there's going to maybe be some retooling that happens before he moves into Aries again in 2023. Right? 2023. Yeah. Am I paying close enough attention?
The end of, when he moves out of Pisces will be December, the end of December 2022. Yeah. And so, and the last time that Jupiter was in Pisces was 2010. So you can think back to what was going on in 2010. Now, Neptune wasn't there. So you didn't have this like special kind of energy that we'll have in 2022. But Jupiter in Pisces, to get a flavor of that, he moves about every 12 years. He is a cycle. So he was in Pisces in 2010. So you can feel into that. Also, if you're familiar with what house Pisces is for you, you can kind of reflect on what area was expanding for you at that time. And there may be some, picking up where you left off, or just more expanding in that area for you, and just in general. So sometimes it's nice to look back and reflect on what was going on during that time. So that was Jupiter in Pisces. And then, like I mentioned, the last time that Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct in Pisces was 1856. And I wasn't around then, so I can't tell you for sure what it was like, but it was the Victorian era, which personally, I think they created some of the most beautiful houses. And, if you look back to some of it was a very, Pisces is a sign of the arts, and, so music and arts and architecture and all of these pieces, it's a very creative sign. You can look back and say, okay, well, that was an interesting time. Like you look at the dresses that the women wore. And like, for me, particularly because I grew up in a Victorian house, like the detail and the beauty in that time period was amazing. And then you look at what came next, and it was very simple. And the houses did not have the, intricate detail that the Victorian era had. So that's interesting too, to feel into the last time that Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct in Pisces. Like there were some beautiful things happening during that time.
Yeah.
Also, again, like just if you look at history, there's always challenging things that happen as well.
Like the Civil War. just gonna drop that in there. The Civil War happened. 1856. It was,
which I kind of feel like we're in an energetic civil war. If you just
absolutely,
like the divide, like
the divide in the United States, we're very much in an energetic civil war. And I know I was recently asked, does it feel like that's going to go kinetic and show up on a really physical level? And I would like to say no, because who fucking wants that shit? And who knows what the monster is going to do in its death throes.
Yeah. And I feel like we have, there have been some very, it looks different. It's not like a war where you have like two groups going into battle, but there is violence. Like you look at the shootings and even the violence in protests and things. It's a different kind of bringing into the physical, but we have already seen pieces of that. And I think that also brings up a point of the US has a chart, right? So like how we all have birth charts when we were born. Well, the United States has one. It was July 4th, 1776. And why that's significant this year is we're coming up on our Pluto return. So we as humans never get to experience a Pluto return because it takes 246 years. But countries and things like that do get to experience a Pluto return. And it's interesting, if you look back in history, it can often be the fall of, civilization.
Rome.
So if you look
Rome.
at this cycle of Pluto, right, it's bigger than a personal one. Like we get to have Saturn returns and we get to have Jupiter returns. We never experience in particular a Pluto return, but the US is coming up on there. So we've been in that energy for a while because Pluto is such a slow mover, but it hits exactly in February 2022. It hits the exact point where Pluto was when the Declaration of Independence was signed. And yeah, that's a big one.
And yeah, that's a big one. So I'm just going to invite us to dive a little bit into Pluto and the Sibley chart of the United States. In the Sibley chart of the United States, Pluto is in Capricorn in the second house. So the second house in a birth chart is the house of what we value. And Pluto oftentimes represents money and power. Whether we're talking about Pluto or Hades, depending on whether we're going with Greek or Roman, they're the same guy. One of them means the unseen, and one of them means wealthy. So the unseen wealth and how we deal with that. And I am personally excited about the Pluto return. I look at historically what the energy was during the Revolutionary War, which is when our chart was set up, when the Declaration of Independence happened and the United States was born. We were in a place where we didn't feel like where the people, the human beings, were properly being represented by their government. And we were paying taxes for a government that wasn't working for the people. I don't know if anybody's following me right now. Maybe I'm being too subtle in this. And right now, that's what so much of this divide is. And I look back at the fall of Rome. Rome had become something that was taking up so much geographic territory and had enslaved so many other cultures and people to try to enculturate them to their way of life, that it was unsustainable. It was not just that it was too much geographic territory. It's that the human beings, the population of human life was too diverse over that much territory to be under one level of rulership. And like the fall of Rome doesn't really upset me. They were busy conquering other places and enslaving those people and taking away their culture to impose their culture, Roman culture, which thanks to our pal Constantine was Christian, on the native human beings. Like their beliefs, their way of life didn't matter. Anybody who has done any level of travel and met anybody other than your immediate neighbors understands that everybody on this planet has one deep imperative. I want my family fed and clothed and sheltered and held. So that was 3, but that's not the point. Humans just want to take care of each other. And we're a bigger human family than we pretend we are. Yeah. So go fall of Rome.
Yeah. And like it's nothing to be afraid of. It's going to happen anyway, but it's and I love this. There's a mentor of mine who's like, find the good in it. Like and like the baddest of the bads, even the ones where you're just like, there's no good. there's a sliver. There's always a tiny, tiny sliver. And then when you look back, you can, right, hindsight, but it's nothing that we can avoid. It's also nothing to fear, and to also see the potential in what can be created from things that are destroyed and things that are, and it's like the things that don't work anymore. Like there's a reason why the things that don't work fall, and I think there's so much potential in where we can go. And, the creative, like the minds of people, like, just when, like, sometimes I just listen to people, or like I listen to podcasts, or I listen, have conversations with friends, and it's like, we're all so unique. And when we can all come together and we can all kind of brainstorm and like bring our ideas to the table, like just amazing and wonderful things happen. So that's also the potential of, like opening that, and to have that even grow. And then at the same time, when we're, if we're still on this US chart, Neptune is in opposition to where he was in the US chart. So Neptune is opposing where he was in Virgo. So Virgo was the natal placement for Neptune, and now he is opposite his natal placement in Pisces. So that's a Neptune opposition. And that has hit a few times already in the spring and the summer of 2021. It will hit again February 18th, 2022. So that is happening basically days apart. I mean, basically the same time. Pluto return, Neptune opposition, those two things happening at the same time in February, when the sun will also be in Pisces, like the sun illuminating Pisces, which is a huge theme for 2022. Like for me, that feels like Pisces is the like 2022 theme. And then again, the end of the year, like that's significant. That is very significant. And also that, things that you touched on, like the money and the power. I think money is going to be a big thing that we see a lot of shifting and changing. And I know just in the past few years, like cryptocurrency has kind of been like, it's been there, it's been around for a bit. But I feel like in the last couple of years, like I was just, at Whole Foods, and they had, a magazine, like cryptocurrency big on the front. And I swear, like in the last few weeks, I've just seen it in places that I haven't before. And so, right, like there's a potential for a lot of things that like, and I'm not, saying anything particular in that, but just that there's these new things coming, and like the internet is our technology, like that is our tool. And I think it's not to be underestimated that, that's what we have. And there's a lot, like, look at how we are able to connect globally. Like that is also like, we've never had this before, where we're able to connect so easily globally to so many people. So again, that's all happening basically at the same time, is the Pluto return and the Neptune opposition.
Lovely. I love it. I'm just going to give a quick shout out to our international listeners. Our podcast stats came back. And so a shout out to all of our amazing listeners in the UK, Spain, and Israel. Those are our top 3 countries beyond the United States. So like a huge heartfelt thank you, you other humans in different parts of the world that listen to us. We love you. And then I'm going to dip into some dark Neptune stuff. So Neptune has a history of aspecting the US natal charts Neptune, and some really interesting things happen. They were in an aspect, which was a Neptune square Neptune in 1816, that created something that was actually called the Summer of Fog. And it and this fog descended physically. There was fog all summer. And one of the kind of aspects or markers of Neptune is this fogginess and this inability to see. So that was a Neptune square Neptune summer, was the Summer of Fog. The next thing I'm going to touch on is 1857, which was called the Panic of 1857. It was, we just spoke about 1856 being the last time that Jupiter and Neptune conjuncted in Pisces. And then 1857, it was called the Panic of 1857. And it was a level of financial depression. And it was really associated with the Civil War. And of course, this Neptune I think it would have been a Neptune. I don't know. I don't have it written down, but we're not going to worry about that right now. It was a Neptune aspect in the Sibley chart. I bet Alexis is going to look it up right now just so she can fill us in. And then the third thing I want to touch on is in 1938. That is another Neptune aspect we want to look at. And that was the Great Depression. So Neptune and Pluto playing in 2022 feels like there is a lot of invitation for us to diversify, for us to shift what our relationship is with money. And for me, that really plugs back into Venus, which we will get to Venus. She's coming. Don't worry. There's where do we place our values? And is our value going to continue to be about money? Or what's going to change and what's going to fall? Like, how is the currency going to shift in the world? You know, is the Fed here in the US going to continue to just be able to create money out of air? Because that's what they do. Or are we going to do something different? Are we going to clear away our like almost distorted Pluto hoarding mentality and move into creating space for a different way of being and a different way of showing up? We need to reevaluate our relationship with money as security. That's that like, is money actually security, or does security come from a place inside that cannot be taken away?
Yeah. And what is your relationship to money? You know, because I know for me, like looking back, like it has changed a lot over the years. And I've had different relationships, like any relationship, like I've had different relationships with money. And it's been really interesting to look at that journey, but to look at it as an energy and as a relationship. You know, I don't think too many people think of it that way. Like we think of it as money, and there's that scarcity of like, I'll never have enough. And then there's the, you know, just the unhealthy relationships with money.
Yeah.
But when we actually can feel into what is my relationship with money and kind of dive into that, and Venus retrograde is a great time for that. So for the next, you know, month through January, like great time to evaluate those type of things. Where does your value come from? And even without, you know, money, where does it come from within yourself? And then to come back to that 1857 date, it was a Neptune opposition. So it's what we're in right now. Yeah, we're in a Neptune opposition. So that would reflect, and what was that again?
That was the Panic of 1857.
Which was around, was it financial or?
Yes, it was a financial depression.
Yeah. So that feels
just a thing.
That feels like a cycle to know that we're in that same placement. Right. And that may be something that does get expanded, is this like crisis of money. But then what does it, right? Like, doesn't have to be a crisis for like personally, right? Like there can be that going on and still like, yeah, like where does that affect you personally? Because I feel like that's coming. And if, you know, if you are kind of paying attention to what's going on there, they're saying that it's coming. And if you look at the astrology and it's like, yep, it's
coming.
And where do you want to be? How can you set yourself up for the best possibility in that? Because yeah, I think it's going to look so different for so many people. And again, it's nothing to fear. It's just, okay, this is coming. This is interesting. This has happened before, right? And it hasn't happened like this because we haven't had where we are right now. Like, right, there's this, like I said, like the internet and the connection globally. And just, you know, you look at the placements of this year, like it's unique. And so, yes, there's been pieces that have happened before, but it hasn't happened now. It hasn't happened as we are today. So yeah, there's so much there. Any other pieces on that? Because I feel like Venus is a great like segue into Venus. She ties right into all of this.
And I'm gonna, since we're going with Venus, I'm gonna just take us back to Pluto a little bit, because Venus and Pluto, they're dancing. So before we head into Venus, I want to touch on the fact that Pluto is the Lord of Death. And I got a lot of dark goddess energy, so death is good with me. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of death in 2022. And whether that's the loss of human life, whether that's the loss of life on the planet, whether that's the hopefully loss of our institutions. Obviously, we all know where Amie's leaning. I can't keep my mouth shut. We have to keep in mind that death is just a transition point. It means that there is something that is ending as it moves into being born as something else. And death can be a very fast process, or it can be a very slow process, because change takes time. And building something new, Venus and Capricorn, what are we going to build on our values? That's something that takes time and work, and the energy of dreaming, Neptune and Pisces, and our imagination and our expansion of our imagination, Jupiter and Pisces. And how much are we going to resist the death? How much are we going to fight for things that don't serve the whole? We have ridiculous yard signs here in Minnesota that say it will be good again. It will be good for fucking who? Like, it wasn't good. It wasn't. It wasn't working. So can we allow that idea that it will be good again to die, so we can actually birth something that holds the whole of life, not just humanity, life, that we can see things in a holistic system, not as parts and pieces. So I'm really leaning into this Pluto bringing with him death, and moving even into what you were speaking of, which I love, about the fact that we're moving something we've never been in, because we have so much exists that never existed before. We have the internet. We have this ability to, you be in Rhode Island and me be in Minnesota, and we get to play online, and then we get to share it with our listeners. And it feels like there is this idea that institutional wisdom or institutional knowledge can be taken, pulled from the past, and plunked down and applied now. And it feels like an important reminder to speak into that imagination, that all of that institutional learning and knowledge and wisdom is great. And we need to take into account what is here and now and present. Because if we don't take into account what is present, we're denying ourselves the opportunity to pick out a new vase, to pull your metaphor from earlier, to realize that the vase is broken. It's not worth putting back together. Because I, for one, don't want to see people continue to remain small and hide their lights. We need everyone shining their lights. And to do that, we need a different vase. We need a bigger vase. And if we're just using institutional old rather than present, both and bring it together, we're limiting our possibilities. And Jupiter in Pisces doesn't want our possibilities limited. And Venus, bless her heart, is in Capricorn, really asking us, what do you value? And are you going to build on your values? There's my little.
And so there's two points coming up for me in that idea of death. Like I've told this story actually recently, and I've told it a lot to people who know me. Of a couple of years ago, I was going through a deep transformation, And I was seeing like literally seeing dead bird, to the point where I would go over my mom's house and she'd be like, oh my God, there's another dead baby bird. And the two of us were just like, ah. And I started pulling tarot cards for the first time. And all I was pulling was like death and like these dark cards. And I was just freaking out, thinking that I was going to die, that someone I knew was going to die. I was just in this place of like, why is death so loud? And it freaked me out. And as I moved through that summer, I remember it was like this, it was all summer. I moved through death all around me. And like to the point where I came home and there was this bird, like the sky was eerie and there was this bird like that I went to go, expecting it would fly away and it didn't move. It was just like seemingly standing up on a chair, like dead. I was like, but it can't be dead, because it was very confusing. Then a crow came over to it and then all of a sudden it flew away. I was watching the whole thing like, I don't really know what's going on, but I know this is a lot of eerie, weird death stuff. So anyway, and literally was just seeing death all around me. Again, I stopped pulling tarot cards because it was just freaking me out. But as I moved through it, and when I came out the other side, I realized it was a death for myself. It was a death of like the old parts of me that weren't fitting anymore. The old identities, the old, even the way other people saw me. And there was just this whole new fresh version of myself coming through. And it was one of those honestly magical times. Like that year was so magical and transformative that when I came out on the other side, I was like, oh, I have a new appreciation for death. And it doesn't have to be this one thing that I thought it was. It's actually this really beautiful, like we need death. And like now I have a totally different relationship again with death. And so that's just something that I think, I was talking to friends recently because we were talking about tarot and they were like, oh, is that where the death card is? And I was like, yes. And let me tell you about that, because I love when that card comes, because it just means for me, great, like you're going through this transformation and something amazing is going to be on the other side, because that's what that was. And I've gone through now many of those periods. And like, I love it. Right. And of course, like, I'm not saying like, I'm just like skipping along the whole time. Like there's some moments where, you are in it and you are just like, what, no, I don't want to do this, complete resistance, but you come out on the other side and you're like, I needed that. Like sometimes the most, those moments of crisis, like some of the most, intense moments of our lives are also the most transformative. And when I think back to the times in my life that have been like the heartbreak and just the grief and the, things happening in my life, that's when stuff has happened. Like that's when it happens. And so I think the more we can shift our relationship with death, the more we give potential for it and the more we allow it to happen in small ways too, in just the shifting of like an old thought, right? And the ways that we can move through it in the small and the big ways. So yes, like I feel like that is a beautiful reminder. And then also the idea of things falling, and also remembering like we are where we are because of everything that's happened. And so it's not just like, it's getting rid of that good, bad. It's kind of just saying like, yeah, like all of that stuff has happened, but it had to happen for us to be where we are. And again, that, idea of there's always good in the bad, like there is. And the image that I saw was like, it's not like a toddler, like knocking down a stack of blocks and just being like, no, we're going to start over. It's this architect coming in and being like, this doesn't work anymore. Like we have outgrown, right? Like this, even, styles change, things change, but foundation needs to be fixed, but it's coming in a very like higher mature, like I'm thinking like Saturn, right? It's coming in this way of saying like all of the stuff that we've learned. And again, if you want to call it good, bad, or otherwise, like we've learned from that. We get to see, oh, wow, that was what was under the surface. That was what was bubbling. And I didn't know that. And now I do. And all the different ways that can show up. And so it's like, that's the image that was coming. It's rather than a toddler knocking it down and being like, it wasn't good. Like, let's rebuild from zero. Like there has been so much wisdom in what has happened over the years. And even you can look back to not even just in the US, but, civilizations, like there is wisdom. And also we're not there. we get to have this technology and this ability to connect in a way that we have never. And so, we can look back, and I was just listening to a podcast with an amazing man, Matthias DeStefano, and he was saying, like, yeah, we don't have the pyramids. Like, that was a feat for, them to build that, and the way they built that, and magic, like pure magic of that time. He's like, we don't have that, but we have the internet. Like, that is our tool. That is, and it can be a sacred tool that when used in ways that we really don't even, like, we haven't even tapped into yet. Right. And it's like, it's not comparing where we were, but it's like everything has gotten us to where we are. And all of the knowledge that has come from past civilizations, and even from the US, like all of that we have learned has got us to where we are. And so that was another piece of, like, it's just kind of like tweaking and learning as we go. And we get all of this wisdom. And I think that's another thing about the internet. Like, I remember having to go to the library and like having the little, like, looking up like, it's just so, like, having information. And also, like, I mean, sometimes the information isn't always, like, that's another piece of like discernment. Sometimes information, you're not getting the full story, but we do have access to information that we didn't before as easily. So that's another piece too.
That's beautiful. I love that. This reminder that life is happening for us. And life is about growth and change, and death is a part of growth and change. You were talking about like the rebuilding and the foundation, and what I saw was Gandalf at Minas Tirith, and how, the armies of Mordor came in, and like toddlers, they threw big rocks at shit and things broke, and how we can rise from that and hold what is pure and what works for us. And I also love this idea that, yeah, the pyramids are amazing and beautiful, and it is magic how they did it. Like, there's a lot of theories that it was all done with vibration and sound,
Yeah.
which I think is just, oh, my heart. And we spend so much time working in the unseen, and we can't decide we're going to go down this road and see what happens in the unseen energetic realm that holds us. When we decide that, when we say, this is what's highest, even if it's hard, even if this puts me into death, even if this puts me into grief, whatever hard thing that this choice puts me into, I know that this is the aligned choice. This is the right choice. And what we don't see is that unseen, that internet piece, the energetic internet that connects us all, and how making that aligned choice, even if it's the hard choice in the short term, by being that buffalo that goes into what is hard, goes into the storm, how it energetically ripples out and shifts everything. And maybe the hard is actually shorter going into it than taking this choice over here that is the easy choice, that is the road that is well traveled. By making the choice to stay with the partner that abuses us, by making the choice to stick with the job that doesn't work for us, making those choices instead of letting those things die, by not changing how we relate to our children and our friends and our spouses and our lovers and our parents. By keeping a death grip on those things, we're choosing what's familiar. And we don't get a chance to take this path that may be a little harder and allow for the unseen, that internet, to shift energetically. And we come out, and then that next step is magic. That next step is stepping into that wheel of fortune, where we get, back to the tarot, where we get everything we've ever wanted. And we have the opportunity to recognize that by taking the next step that's aligned, no matter how hard it is, we've always had everything we've ever wanted, because we can get everything we've ever wanted. We already have it. It's there. It's the unseen magic, and like really playing in that. How fun is it?
Yeah. And I think a beautiful reminder for 2022 as well is, like being grounded. Because I hear a lot of people say, those of us who remember a time before the internet, like, I miss like the simplicity of being outside, of like, just before the internet. And so I think there's a piece of, well, what if it was both? What if we do connect and we start like, and I've seen this, in my neighborhood of, people growing their own food. And even in the winter, I'm in New England, but having greenhouses and really connecting into these, like, and if whatever it is for you, but really connecting into, the earth is coming of like this groundedness of like back to our roots of what it means to actually be connected to, simply where our food comes from, but also more like our connection to our bodies and to the earth, like huge. And I know I have seen that coming back more so, right, in the past few years. And so what if we take that and we take this, like, because I was just talking to a friend too about, remember when it was dial-up and it was like a struggle to get on the internet, and that someone picked up the phone and you were kicked off. Like, the ease to which we have access to the internet now is like, right, like, it's fascinating to me to see how fast it's evolved. And like, so I can't even imagine how it's going to continue to evolve. But what if it was both? What if we took both and we didn't get lost in just the internet and we're living in some virtual reality, but we take that and we connect it and we have both, and we are still connected to our roots. And that to me is like if we can even touch into that in 2022, which I think, again, like we have been, but if we can really do it in a bigger way, that feels important, like really being grounded so that we don't get lost in the illusion of Pisces.
Yeah, which feels like such big Venus. Venus is our sensuality. She's our connection to our body and our ability to touch and be on the earth, to lay down and watch the clouds. Talk about hours of entertainment. lie in the grass and watch the clouds and feel what it is to be on the earth, to smell it and to feel it, to look at it. Because yeah, the internet is great, and the unseen, obviously you and I spend a lot of time there. It is a place that we both love and thrive in. And I know we also both love and thrive in being out in nature. Both and, not either or.
And when you combine those two, like, because I feel like you have to really love being in your body and life, right? And having the connection to spirituality, like when you bring those together, that's when, for me, the real magic happens. Because it's not just about like transcendence and like we're in a body, like that's a gift, like right, like I will never be in this body again. I do believe like there's a part of us that's eternal, so there will always be this piece that goes on, but like being in this body right now, like everything I get to do in this lifetime is in this body. And so that is beautiful when you can bring those two things together. And also that, going back to that death piece, like people used to celebrate death and make it like it was this journey, because it really, it is. We don't know what it'll be like, but it's this journey into something else, but and to celebrate the body that we have now, and not to, to really be present, like to not just try to get somewhere. Yeah, that's Venus. And so Venus will be retrograde through the end of January. She stations direct January 29th, I believe. So from December 19th to January 29th, she's retrograde. So it's that 40-day kind of period of really like deep introspection of, what do I value? What is my connection with my body? Where am I trying to escape and just be somewhere else, rather than being present with what is? And another piece to bring in is Venus and Mars started a cycle together in July. So Venus and Mars are like, they're just this beautiful polarity. They are just a complement to each other. They're opposites, but also like they are, you know, the cosmic lovers in mythology. But they started a cycle in July, and they will in February and March hit their second and third conjunction. So they began their cycle with a conjunction in Leo in July, and then in February they will hit their second conjunction in Capricorn, just after Venus is stationed direct, and then again in March 6th, at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which feels significant. Like the 0 degree is a critical degree, so that there's a significance there, and that their third conjunction will be in Aquarius. They're going to both enter Aquarius together. Like they're usually kind of doing their dance, like they're in different spots, and then they'll meet up here and there. But this is also unique that they meet 3 times for this cycle. Often they'll start a cycle once, but then every once in a while they'll do this dance where they meet in a conjunction 3 times to start that cycle, and that they enter Aquarius together, which again, Aquarius is the revolutionary. It's what we spent a lot of time expanding in 2021, that they enter in together, like hand in hand, meeting up 0 degrees of Aquarius. Like there is some big magic there. So again, there's so much that happens in this first quarter of 2022. We also have the 3rd Venus-Pluto conjunction on March 3rd. So they formed a conjunction twice in December, and then they'll do a 3rd conjunction in March. So this whole, like really that whole period, February for sure is a lot going on in February. And then March too, there's some really big pieces that are happening. And then in March and April, they'll meet up with Saturn, who is like, he's the Gandalf. He's the, he is the, also the, like the architect and the carpenter, like bringing things into form. So that will happen again, the end of March into April, to bring us into that second quarter.
Beautiful. I love this.
Yeah.
I love that they're dancing together. I love that they're coming together in Capricorn, like they met in fiery, heart-centered, the leadership of Leo. And then they did their dance apart, and they've been doing their thing. And Venus is settled in to Capricorn until early March. She started there in November. She is really wanting us to look at, are we building our values? Are we walking our talk? And are we actually standing for something? Or are we just waffling? And it feels like Mars meeting up with her in Capricorn it can be this reinforcement of the masculine energy really meeting the feminine energy and saying, I've got your back, and I'm going to take action on your honey-do list. I got this. And yes, this moving into Aquarius together, moving into this, like, Aquarius tends to feel expansive in the imaginal realms to me. Like those thought realms, the thought forms can be really expansive. And how do we expand on the idea of union? And whether it's the union between the masculine and the feminine to create a whole, or we need union in so many places right now. We've been, just rewind and listen to all of the ranting about union. I don't need to go into that further. Mars is also going to conjunct with Pluto, because he's going to have to pass Pluto to get to his lover, so that they can move into Aquarius together. And Mars and Pluto are similar signatures. Mars in his highest form is not just this aggressor. He is desire. He is, the Latin of the stars. What is it that you are most desiring? Because the stars want that for you also. And the fact of these two energies coming together, that are of such similar signature. I've heard before that when Mars and Pluto battle, Mars may win the war, but Mars may win the battle, but Pluto will win the war, because there is a strand in Pluto that Pluto is about stamina. It's about being in for the long haul. Whereas Mars can be more like in and out. He's a faster mover. Obviously, he's got a 2-year cycle. Pluto has a 246-year cycle. So like just looking at that very literal cycle, Mars can be a flash in the pan, but Pluto is stamina. Pluto is sticking with the battle to see it through and to carry it on. So I'm really feeling that. And then, Saturn, my pal Saturn. I love Saturn. Love me some Saturn. The sun is also conjuncting Venus, which is that Venus star point.
Yeah, January 8th. That is the beginning of a Venus cycle. And yeah, that is when Venus and the sun form a conjunction, and Venus is close to us. She's between us and the sun. And I believe we talked about this in more detail in the Capricorn season podcast.
We touched on our whole, if anybody wants
the Patreon.
Yeah.
I know we did the Patreon in depth. We did a whole podcast on Inanna and Venus, which we went into this in depth, but I believe we touched on it in the Capricorn podcast as well. But basically, yeah, that's the beginning of a Venus cycle. And so that's really significant. That will begin her descent journey, basically. If, we touched on the myth of Inanna. And then to go back to Mars and Pluto, that conjunction is on March 3rd. And Mars brings activation. Yeah, he brings those fiery sparks like wherever he goes. So whenever he's in an aspect to other planets, he activates them. He kind of like lights this fire under them. And so if we feel into Pluto, who's been in this, really deep transformative position for the last few years, and then especially when we take a look at February and the Pluto return, that again, we've had that energy for a few years, but it hits exact in February. Then Mars coming and like lighting a fire under that, like that's a pretty activating period. So that's March 3rd. And that's also right around the new moon. So we have a new moon in Pisces on March 2nd, which to me, it's conjunct Jupiter. So it's in Pisces. When we go back to that like theme of 2022, it's a new moon in Pisces conjunct Jupiter. So to me, that is a big, new moons are beginning of cycles. It's a big like kind of start and beginning energy, although we've had Jupiter will be in Pisces for a few months at that point. So like definitely the ball is rolling in expansion of that area. But to me, the new moon is like that March 2nd new moon is pretty big and like really kicking off that energy of Jupiter and Pisces. It's conjunct it's conjunct Pisces, sorry. It's in Pisces, conjunct Jupiter. And that is at 12 degrees of Pisces. And so Neptune's on the other side of Pisces. They'll meet up in April, but it's pretty like gang's all there, right? It's a sun, moon, Jupiter, Neptune, and then to have the sun, moon, and Jupiter basically all in a little group, to me, that's like this big kickoff. It's like this big start point of this energy. So again, we're going to be in it, but to me, that new moon feels significant. It feels like the starting of that area of, again, like that idea of our visions and really like leaning into the possibilities that can happen. And that new moon feels really like a beautiful new moon, although it's in the energy of the Pluto and Mars and all this really activating stuff that's happening as well. That's again, the same day, March 3rd is, Venus, Pluto, and Mars are going to be all basically conjunct on March 3rd. So it's big energy. But when I take a look at like the theme for 2022 and that new moon in Pisces on March 2nd, yeah, that feels significant.
Yeah, the Venus Sun conjunction really feels like shining a light on how we define abundance within ourselves. And the other thing,
January 8th, just to go back to that, the Venus Sun conjunction. Yes.
Yeah. The other thing that feels like it's sticking out, I know we're dancing with both Mars and Venus right now, is that as Venus moves through her retrograde in Capricorn and then her direct in Capricorn, she's going to be triggering the Pluto Eris squares. We had 5 of them starting in 2020 all the way through 2021. I think the last one was October 9th of 2021. We had 5 Pluto Eris squares. So Pluto's down there in Capricorn, which is to some extent top-down authority. To make it really simple, that's how it's been showing up. And Eris is in Aries. So there's this really grassroots energy piece to it. And Venus is going to be kind of poking at the two of them. They're both slow movers. Eris and Pluto. Slow movers in the square. And so Venus is retrograded over them. And then she's going to be moving back direct, and she's going to activate it at the from the end of February until the beginning of March.
So yeah, the first quarter feels very fiery and activating in a lot of ways. We have, to me, even when I was doing, kind of writing out by quarter, first quarter is a lot. I think a lot of that has to do with the US return as well, the Pluto return and the Neptune opposition that we talked about for the US chart. So there's a lot going on in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. And then any last pieces to wrap up first quarter of 2022?
Well, we didn't talk about the nodal shift, which happens in January.
That's right. So January 18th, the node shift, which is big. Yes. And you mentioned at the start. Mm-hmm. So the nodes will be shifting into Taurus and Scorpio from Gemini and Sagittarius. So the North node is in Gemini right now and will be switching into Taurus. And then the South node will be shifting from Sagittarius to Scorpio. So we're going to move into the Taurus Scorpio axis. And I always like to think of the nodes as like, it's a new chapter. And you can also look in your chart where you natally have the nodes, because there is something called a nodal return, which is about every 18 years. And I like to say when you go through a nodal return that that's like a new volume. So look at where you have the nodes in your chart, because you may be coming up on a nodal return if you have your nodes in Taurus and Scorpio. But it's a new chapter for us collectively anyway, and for us personally. We're going into a new chapter with the nodes. And to me, I love Taurus and Scorpio. It just may be because that's my rising descendant axis. But Taurus is that very connected to the body, Venusian, like enjoying the senses of life, like enjoying life itself in all the different ways that can happen. And then Scorpio, there's a depth to Scorpio. So also having the South node in Scorpio, to me, there's like this digging up of the old. And it can be like old parts of self that it's like, I'm ready to express this part of myself. I didn't even know that there is this part of myself. But there's also like, there's an exciting part to that. Like there's this mysterious like excitement of like, who knows what can be uncovered, right? And then to have the North node in Taurus feels very important. Like that idea that we brought, in of how important it is to be connected to the earth and to our bodies. Like the North node is going to be shining a light for the next year and a half in that area of, really being connected to our bodies and to life and to, and also Taurus money is a very, Taurus kind of energy. So again, like the fact that this is where the nodes will be during all this potent power, money stuff. Like, and to me, Scorpio has this like power kind of energy. Taurus has this very, tangible money energy. Like it's going to be an interesting chapter. But I personally think Taurus and Scorpio are just some really beautiful energies. And like everything, there is the, the shadow side to it all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love, so yes, there's the earth, we're shifting, we're going through an elemental shift from fire and air to earth and water. So there's this almost a very tangible level of vulnerability. And it feels like we've become so enculturated with this idea that that vulnerability is a weakness and that there's a wrongness to it. And there's a spectrum of vulnerability that is healthy. And if we look at Scorpio, the shadow side of Scorpio is fear of betrayal and being closed off and armored and secretive. And the light of Scorpio really feels to me the discernment of understanding, like, this is private and this is mine and it's not ready to share yet. And this is a vulnerability I'm going to share with this person or this selection of people. And there's a spectrum of vulnerability and a stepping more deeply into our discernment of realizing we don't need to air everything and that we can personally just ground things. Like, it doesn't need to be aired. We can just ground it into the earth. We can ritualize our shower time, like using that Scorpio water to bring in cleansing and flow. And yeah, Scorpio is deep and beautiful, and Taurus is very sexy. It's very sensual. It is very earthy. It is there's an eroticism that feels like it's going to be very present, and eroticism being of, like, the actual root of the word, which is life, feeling alive, getting outside and grounding, being in nature. You know, right now we're supposed to be having a snowstorm here. We're not really having a snowstorm, but for periods, as I've been looking out the window, we've had beautiful white fluffy flakes. And that's life happening outside right now. That's water and life falling from the sky that's going to enter the water cycle. And I can guarantee you that I will go outside later and there will be people outside playing in the snow, having life and expressing life rather than sitting in the house hiding from it. And it really feels like that is a big part of this nodal shift, is both the landing and the grounding, right? And the shedding that goes with the South Node in Scorpio. So there's going to be a healing for the Scorpio, letting go of Scorpio is death, sex, and tax. Back to that taxation without representation piece, apparently. And how do we express our Scorpio energy cleanly? Because we all have it. Everybody has some Scorpio energy. Find out where it sits in your natal chart. We can always drop a link in the show notes to touch in on that. And this is an important piece of where we're going. Alexis has, said that the North Node is a flag that's waving that says, if you come this way. And it's in Taurus. That flag has moved into Taurus. If you come toward the earth, if you come toward your body, if you come into yourself and feel what you're meant to feel, the sensuality of it, life may be a little easier. So I'm pretty excited about the nodal axis, and I know we'll be getting into the eclipses because, they're happening in a Taurus Scorpio axis for the next 18 months.
Right. And so that is what makes an eclipse. Is an eclipse happens when it's a new or a full moon that is next to the nodes. So that's what makes an eclipse. So yes, we will be getting into that. And I think, again, just, because can't hear it enough, that I think those who are connected to their bodies, who are in love with life, right? And you don't have to be in love with life every moment. Like, right. Like this is just, but that's part of it, of like loving all of it, loving all aspects of it and learning to love it, right? Like we are here to learn. This is what our human experience is. We are learning and evolving, and that is part of the deal. But those who are, you know, connected and learning and trying to love life, I think those are the people that will get the most return on this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which brings us to now second quarter of the year is April 12th is the date of that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces. It's at 23 degrees of Pisces. So look at what you have in your chart around 23 degrees of Pisces, because that also can be fascinating. And Venus will be in Pisces that date as well. She'll be in early Pisces, but Venus will be there. And Venus is exalted in Pisces. Like this is just such a beautiful energy to me that like this is a highlight of the year right here in April. And again, because Jupiter gets to be in Pisces for most of the year, then he dips back end of the year. Neptune's there all year. Like we're in this all year because Jupiter doesn't wrap up the his stay in Pisces until the end of the year. So although this is happening in April, it's not like it's, you know, happens then it's done. We're in this energy for the whole year, but this is the kind of that like pinnacle of when they join together. And that's just like really beautiful energy. Again, they're both the rulers of Pisces. And it brings in this like this expansion of like creation and like infinite possibilities of what it is for you. And that's the thing too, of like, we are all unique. So our visions and our dreams are not going to be the same. And that is also like giving ourselves permission to have those dreams. And even if we're not sure what that looks like it's just such a expansive energy that is also right in the energy of that first eclipse, which happens April 30th. So that's happening in April. So we are moving towards that eclipse energy, which is a Taurus eclipse, right? Like that, bringing it in, like, right? We're not just dreaming like and having these amazing dreams. It's like, we want to have these dreams and have them happen.
Yeah.
That is like what this year is about. And so that first eclipse of the year, we have 4 eclipses.
Only. This is a light year.
It's a light year. Yeah, we can have anywhere from 4 to 7, I believe. So we have 4. We had 4 last year as well. But the first eclipse is April 30th, 10 degrees of Taurus, and it's aspecting Mars. The first 2, so the 2 eclipses in the spring are both aspecting Mars. So that first eclipse, again, April 30th, 10 degrees of Taurus. So it's a solar eclipse, meaning it's a new moon eclipse in Taurus. So it's that beginning energy.
I love that. That's so good. I love eclipses. If anybody wants to review like relatively recent eclipses, you can check out episode 12 and episode 24. We touched into eclipses in both of those episodes. And it is a new moon eclipse. You're at the dark of the moon. You're in this, what is going to come up. And it feels like there is, because of the Taurus Scorpio with Mars aspecting this, Mars, I'm going to go back to that desire piece. In his highest form, he is our of the stars desire and how we're going to take action toward it. So just like Alexis said, it's not just the dreaming it, it's the bringing it in. How we don't need to know how and every step from point A to point B. We just need to know the next right step, the next best step that moves us towards what we want.
And when you look at the chart for that eclipse, you have Mars, Venus, Neptune, and Jupiter all in Pisces. And you have Venus at that point will be basically, she's a conjunct Jupiter to the degree, and then there are a few degrees away from Neptune. So that Venus will have caught up, because we mentioned that exact conjunction with Jupiter and Neptune on April 12th Venus is in early Pisces, so she's making her way in. But to have all 4 of those there, and even to have Mars there, bringing an activation. Now, he's not super comfortable in Pisces because he's like a fiery warrior. So he's like, okay, I'm in this huge, watery, like infinite, like, can be a little just disorienting for Mars, but he's still bringing activation there. So the fact that he's there, bring this activation in Pisces again, because that's just the theme we'll keep coming back to. And he's sextiling which means he's basically 60 degrees away, which is a helpful and more harmonious aspect to that eclipse. Like, it's just really interesting to feel into everything that's going on in Pisces during that first eclipse. And then the second eclipse is May 16th in Scorpio, because we go back and forth on that axis. And that one is aspecting. It's in a trine to Mars, who will still be in Pisces, and Mars and Neptune will be next to each other. So it's trining basically Mars and Neptune in Pisces. Again, right, this is the theme of the year. And then it's in a square to Saturn in Aquarius, who is right next to Vesta in Aquarius. So that second eclipse, and again, we mentioned that Jupiter will have moved into Aries at this point. So in between these two eclipses we're talking about, Mars enters Aries. Jupiter enters Aries, and then Mars also enters Aries the end of May, like right after that eclipse. So going back to that Jupiter piece though, because Jupiter is such a big, energy of 2022, he moves in the middle of those two eclipses. And Mars is just Mars is there for all of this. Like, he's just like activating all of it. And then for Mars to move into Aries, Mars is home. So May 24th, right after these eclipses, after he's had this, he's like, okay, I've activated Pisces, did what I could do there. He met up with Neptune, right? There's this activating of also Saturn and Vesta, who we can go into in a minute. But Mars then comes home in Aries. And he is that to me feels like not only do we have Jupiter entering Aries, and we talked about how it's that, not getting lost in the illusion of Pisces. It's okay, how can we actually start and make things happen? We have Mars in Aries, who is home, and he is it's go time. He is finally home. He's also home in Scorpio, so we had him home a few months ago, but that all together, that's that's the highlight of this eclipse. The second quarter is really about this eclipse energy and Jupiter and Mars moving into Aries.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. It's been very funny lately. I have very good friends. They have a brand new white golden retriever puppy who is long and skinny and looks a lot like Falcor from the Neverending Story. And then a few weeks ago, I had one of the women in my women's circle send me a voice memo saying that she just watched the Neverending Story and she realizes how much of a theme it is for right now. And then I was listening to a podcast and they were going on and on about the Neverending Story. So for those of you who are young and did not see the Neverending Story, I'm just spoiler warning before I dive into this. I saw the Neverending Story a lot as a child. There was a horse, there was a white fuzzy dragon, which was spectacular. His name's Falcor. He looks like the puppy I mentioned. And it is about our ability to imagine and then take action on our imagination. So the beauty of Pisces and everything going on in the Piscean realm, the imaginal realm. And it's been really juicy because in shamanism, we talk about the imaginal realm, not our imagination. That's kind of our child's play area is our imagination, but the imaginal realm is an actual place. It's the lower world or the upper world or the middle world. There's 3 realms in shamanism. And with everything going on in Pisces and Mars going through there, and then he and Jupiter stepping into Aries to take action on what we're going to build, I just can sit back and really see this never-ending story theme playing out, because the story was about this boy deciding he was going to take action towards saving an imaginal realm. He got drug into this book. I cried my eyes out when the horse gets sucked into the swamps of sorrow. My classmates still were mocking me about it at our 10-year class reunion 15 years ago. They don't have better things to do. And because what's left is this piece of the imaginal realm. And even if we have a piece, we have something that can be planted in and grown. We have a seed that can be used to access this and build and create on our values. Venus and Capricorn, she's meeting up with our lover, and then we've got these eclipses going on in all of this Taurus North Node energy. So I'm loving it. And yeah, we need to keep our feet on the ground. We need to focus on what we want so that we're taking right, highest good action, and keeping in mind that the highest good doesn't always feel great to our little human selves. And what's soul aligned for one is soul aligned for everyone. It's a deep calling, and it's hard. And yes, it has us occasionally slogging through some stuff we don't want to feel. And when we're present with our emotions, it is a 90 to 100-second chemical cycle through our body. Use those markers. What is my body feeling? Back to Taurus here. What is my body feeling in this moment? Because that helps me learn what my markers are so I can be most present. So I can move toward the storm and know that I can walk into that and come out the other side. We are so much more capable as individuals and humans, and our resiliency is so much higher than we've maybe been given credit for, because we've been taught to farm out our resiliency and our dependency. And I'm not falling into the like, let's be islands. I'm calling on our resiliency through vulnerability. And the vulnerability of leaning into the imaginal realms, into the unseen, into this Piscean theme, and bringing it down into reality with this North Node Taurus energy, like really grounding it down.
And embracing that our imagination and our ability to imagine is just as real as anything that we can see. Like, I love the idea that anything that has been created was imagined first. Mm-hmm. And that also there are like indigenous cultures who didn't have a word for imagination. That to them, it was the same. Mm-hmm. That it really is all the same. Just it's our ability to bring it in, but we have lost touch with, we give value to the things that we can tangibly see and feel that are right in front of us. And we leave like imagination as, oh, that's, like a kid's thing. But when we can touch into that, like all great inventions and creations were imagined first. And those are the people who, you read any, right, like great story of someone who created something amazing, like they received so much pushback and failure and all of these pieces, but they kept going because they believed in their vision. And so that's a reminder for all of us for this year, is to like that is real. Whatever you desire and can imagine, and like that is real. And how it will happen and the details, we often don't know. But also that's what makes a dream, right? Is we don't know how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
If we knew how, it wouldn't be a dream. It would just be a goal or something on our to-do list.
I love that. Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
And the possibilities are endless. Like the Aboriginals actually call it dreaming when they journey and when they live. Like, it's not just in the Aboriginal shamanic tradition, we don't just dream at night when we sleep. We're dreaming all the time. For the Toltecs, they call it the dream of the world, that every single moment we're dreaming, because for the Toltecs, art and science were the exact same thing. There was no separation at all between art and science. And right now we're living in this duality of it's either art or science. Like, what would happen if they came together in a union of the art of science and the science of art, and they danced and they played? And I will oftentimes say, I don't have the imagination to get to or make up the things that happen when I am journeying and in the dream world and in the shamanic realm. I don't have the imagination for that. And everyone who loves me knows that I don't, which is also one of the reasons I know it's so real, is because my head could not make it up. But in that dream time, in the imaginal realm, we're given gifts that we have the option of birthing into this world, into this very physical reality. And I feel really excited about 2022.
Oh, I'm very excited about it. I mean, right, like keep your feet on the ground and then go.
Go
And
play in the woods.
Yeah. And having this Jupiter and Mars in Aries feel supportive. So Jupiter will be in Aries again for a good chunk of time, May through October. And so now bringing us to the second half of the year, we have Jupiter stationing retrograde in July in Aries. So that's when we get to have that, right, moves reverse. It starts to make its way back towards Pisces. It will take till October to enter Pisces again, but we get to go into this really like deep space within ourselves, because we will have had the whole first year to experience Jupiter direct through Pisces, through Aries, almost showing us, right, like what is possible, where we can begin, all of the places that we can start. And then we go on this backwards journey where Jupiter says, okay, now let's revisit where we've been. And that's, I feel like, where a depth comes in, because we get to revisit things. And that's what's beautiful too about retrogrades is, as Amiee gets full body chills, we get to revisit and then deepen it. Like it's not just a one and done. So that happens. And then we also have, this is a huge aspect too that I really have my eye on, that we haven't talked much about Uranus, but he's there for it all. And we didn't go back to the Saturn and Vesta, but I'll touch on that for a minute, because we still have that Saturn Uranus square. Again, it's not exact, but they're still in a square aspect. And so Saturn and Vesta came up when we were talking about that second eclipse in May. And so again, remembering that we have Saturn in Aquarius, like a lot of stuff has moved out of Aquarius. We had Jupiter there for the year, but Saturn's in a sign for about 3 years. So we have a little bit more time with Saturn, and he's not done. Really, like if we think about him as the architect, like he spends, a longer amount of time than Jupiter in a sign. So he's like, okay, well, I'm still here in Aquarius, still building. And because Vesta is involved in that eclipse, it's our internal space. Like it's our inner world. It's our inner temple. And I actually was at a family event for the holidays, and I had a cousin of mine use like this, like my body is a temple, and I'm just sitting there like, yay, love it. Because that to me is Vesta, is my body is a temple. But how do I connect into that? How do I like actually like, feel that? And Saturn is there as well. So like that eclipse happening in that Taurus Scorpio excess again, because we talked about that body piece and that depth of Scorpio. Just to touch back, because I said we would go back to it, is Saturn and Vesta there for that eclipse, which feels pretty just like right on with all the messages that we've been sharing, right?
We're continually being reminded. And Vesta, she wasn't a goddess that had, she wasn't a Hera or an Athena or a Zeus that had big temples. Because she is the home and hearth flame, she is our inner flame. Our body is a temple. Every single home held Vesta, held a monument to Vesta in their cook fire, and where the heat came from the home in their fires and their candles. So she is such a day-to-day, moment-to-moment energy of how we meet our body and how we keep our flame burning. And whether we look at it from the point of Dantian or Hara or chakras, we all have a space in our central channel where we have inner flame or inner flames. And how are we tending that? How are we feeding that? Are we building Saturn space to hold this in a way that is supportive, but not constrictive, not what keeps us small? It's not a death grip. It's a Saturn will build whatever we ask him to. He will hold it and he'll make it real and he'll bring it in. And the opportunity for he and Vesta to be in, like, how do you want your inner world to look? How do you want to meet your temple? Yeah, juicy stuff here this year in 2022, people.
And I love that that conversation is already happening. Like I mentioned, like with my family, and then also because the nodes will be shifting into that axis in January, like I feel like it's already, right, like the conversation is already there, it's already starting. And then to have that eclipse towards the middle of the year, again, May, just brings more potency there. And then I left you all hanging with the aspect that I've really been feeling, because I wanted to mention too that Saturn, so Uranus will be aspecting all of that. And so that's part of that Saturn square Uranus that will continue, of this, like bringing in the new, bringing in this new way of being. And so what I'm really feeling is Uranus conjuncts the North Node in August. So that to me is like pretty big. It's like very activating. And Mars is right there too. So that that day, August 1st, Mars conjuncts Uranus and they conjunct the North Node, and that's all squaring Saturn. That's pretty big. So when we feel into the North Node, right, we talked about this chapter that we're entering in the beginning of the year, this Taurus, the nodes will enter Taurus, the North Node will enter Taurus. Then it gets aspected, because Uranus has been in Taurus for a while. He's been there, he's in a sign for about 7 to 8 years. So also, can you hear the background?
It's just it's like barely like a hum. It feels like it's a Uranus, like, hey, thanks for remembering me.
Yeah, I love how like the loud noise comes when I'm, so clearly, like, it's just confirmation for me that yes, this is like a biggie.
That's how I was taking it also.
Yeah,
is confirmation.
So confirmation, that's a biggie. Hopefully it doesn't get too out of hand, but because Uranus he's a revolutionary, and he is this like activating energy. He's this like lightning bolt of energy that comes, and he's a change maker. He's a great awakener. Like it's some big energy. And so the fact that Mars is also there, like I knew that Uranus was gonna conjunct the North Node this time, but I didn't know until I went and did the details that Mars was gonna be there too. So Uranus conjunct the North Node is potent enough. Then to have Mars there, who we talked about as like he's the activator. He brings like that sparky fire. And all squaring Saturn, that was a huge aspect to all of 2021. Like that to me feels right, like another one that I have my eye on for sure.
I know I said in the Capricorn podcast, and I'm going to say again, one of Uranus's nicknames is the King Breaker. I fucking love that. We're going into 2022 with this big Venus energy, this big feminine energy. And then to have the King Breaker conjunct Mars and the North Node square Saturn, it feels like a low level hum that Alexis has going on in her background. And I love that it started. There is the confirmation in that this is a big piece. I am a Hope Springs Eternal person. So I can look at the what other people may consider as scary aspects, or I don't want to go through that. And I can really see all of the power and the potential And the promise, keeping in mind that potential is rooted in the word potent. We find our potential by facing the potent, by embracing what feels big.
I'm just laughing because it's getting louder. Like it's just like getting louder. It feels like it's just like getting closer. So I'll try to keep on mute when I'm not talking, but I'm also laughing at the like significance of that it's just like, yes, because the North Node is like where we want to go. It's again, that flag waving. It's like, it's not always comfortable. The North Node is actually often uncomfortable because it's the unknown, and Uranus is the unknown. So it feels like it's really activating that. And it might be pushing our buttons of like, I don't know, like if that's something that I'm comfortable with, but great. That's a good thing. Just keep going, because just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that we need to shut down. And so just being aware that that's happening around that time. And again, all of this, we will continue to do our monthly forecast. So as we go through all of it, we'll like, deepen in throughout the year.
And come back and listen to this as we go through the year. You can let us know how right or wrong we were.
Right.
Alexis, what is the date that Uranus crosses the solar gateway? It's 15 degrees.
Solar gate. What do you mean by solar gateway?
There is a solar gateway that Uranus is going to be crossing when he hits 15 degrees of Taurus. And this, number one, solar gateway feels like a big deal. And it feels like it's going to be moving us into a different energy with him.
I can look up that date. Can you tell us more about this solar gateway?
I can. So we've got our fixed royal stars that have all, they're mutable stars now. They've shifted. Our fixed stars have shifted. They've moved from fixed signs to mutable signs. And it also feels like there is that we're in the ending of so many big galactic cycles. And with every ending becomes a beginning. Like what dies and falls away, the age of Pisces in the next 160 years is going to be born into the age of Aquarius. We've got a new Venus cycle starting, which is a 20-year cycle of how do you want your life to be pleasurable? How are you ignoring your body and heart need and desires? Like that's a Venus thing. We're moving into a 20-year cycle. We started this cycle with the Saturn Jupiter piece. So this Uranus crossing the solar gateway just feels like another stepping into a new fresh way of being. And it happens when Uranus is at 15 degrees of Taurus. And I don't know the date because
that happens in May.
Yeah, it's not my contract to know the dates.
Yeah, it's pretty much like mid-May.
So right after right like in that eclipse season, right as we're closing out the eclipse season. And it just like I'm really feeling the Uranus still in all of this, calling us towards the new. And even though Uranus is lightning fast change, for us as humans, we have our little human lifetimes. And so going through these things can feel like a real slog. It can feel like it's very hard and like it's taking up a lot of our time. And when we can get out of our human self and up into that higher cosmic perspective, we recognize that what we're in per the cosmic perspective, this is lightning fast change. And we're doing it as quickly as our systems, our physical systems, and the physical system of the earth is able to hold. So while it feels slow and it feels long and drawn out to our humanity, all of this lightning Uranus energy, like how fast can we change this? How fast can we move you forward? How fast can we move you into a higher way of being? It's happening fast on a cosmic level. because a lifetime per the cosmos is the blink of an eye. So it just feels like this is another point of like stepping into the new and moving towards everything that we have the potential to be.
Yeah. And right around that time, Uranus also goes retrograde, the end of August, so August 24th. So because of that, he spends an extended time around this North Node. So he'll be at that point like a couple degrees away from the North Node. Mm-hmm. So he's going to spend a good amount of time on the North Node. And that's also squaring Saturn, because again, they're in that aspect. So Uranus retrograde happens the end of August in Taurus, again, squaring Saturn, conjunct the North Node. So we get an extended period of time, because he's such a slow mover, of Uranus in the North Node. So again, although it hits exact August 1st, we're in it for a good chunk of the rest of the year, because Uranus will be there. And that, to me, also in the North Node, will move it too. But at that point, for sure, when Uranus goes retrograde, again, it's a deepening in, because he gets to go now backwards and over the North Node again.
Yeah. And I know this is a fourth quarter thing, but doesn't Uranus play with the next two eclipses?
Yes, we will get to that.
Yep, we will get to that.
So yeah, probably why the noise is still going, because
we're not done with
we're not done. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's for sure. And then the last piece was there anything else with the third quarter that you basically that July, September through September period?
No, I'm following by planets, because we both dance our own dance and somehow we make it work together.
Totally. So the other piece I have, just to go back to Venus and Mars, who we talked about. So Venus and Mars, who we mentioned, they began their cycle July 2021. They have had their two conjunctions earlier in the year, February and March. They're going to hit their first square to each other within this cycle. So their first square to each other happens in September 16th. It'll be Venus in Virgo and Mars in Gemini. And the moon is also involved. So the moon is involved in also the next Venus-Mars aspect towards the end of the year. But that feels significant too, because it's a squaring of these two who have had these three meetups. They've had these three conjunctions to begin their cycle. And now they're squaring. There's this challenge that comes in. There's this different way of looking at things. And to have Virgo and Gemini, those are both, to me, very, they're Mercury ruled. That's a communication. It's definitely about our mind and our thoughts. And so that to me feels like they're also mutable. There's like a busyness to it. There's a fast pace to it. So to have Venus and Mars squaring off there, that happens in September. And again, to be their first square, that again was just a highlight for the third quarter to bring in. And Mars is conjunct the moon. So it does bring in this kind of softening potential there, but definitely communication and our thoughts and all of that, like some challenges in that area, right? Which is all for the best, to bring up those like to bring up the truths and to bring up, okay, great. Like this is, you think about like, couples who get together and like their first fight, right? Like if they can get through it, like often there's like, wow, like there was beauty in that. Like we went into it and we were able to, however that looks, but you come out the other side and it's like, okay, great. Like it's actually a good thing that we had this, different viewpoints. We had this kind of tension, and then to come out the other side, okay, great, we can come back together. And so to not look at it as like a bad thing, but to look at it as great, this is a challenge that needs to happen anyway. So like we get that going in September.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the bringing it into relationship standpoint of, yeah, that first fight can be a deepening of intimacy based on how you hold yourself in the relationship. And use your ability to make repairs and use your ability to show up. Yeah, there can be big magic in these conflict moments.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And that vulnerability, like that, like you deepen intimacy by being like open and vulnerable and like, you know, and not projecting and saying like, these are my feelings, because that's really all we can do. So I think it's just a time of like really being authentic with ourselves, because right, rather whether we look at this within ourselves or in our relationships with other people, you know, there's truth in it all. So as we move towards the fourth quarter of the year, we hit our next eclipses. So October is also a very busy time. There's some big stuff happening in October. So we have our first solar eclipse on October 25th at 2 degrees of Scorpio, and that is conjunct Venus. So there's also, I don't have it written down, but I believe Venus enters her superior conjunction, meaning like the peak, the midpoint of her phase, end of October. I'm going to look up that date, but that happens as well around that time. And so that eclipse is conjunct Venus. Like that's why Venus was just like, pay attention to me.
Attention to Venus. Be sure to plug into her. And there's, you know, I love the, like bringing it back to that vulnerability spectrum with this Mars Venus square of when we can go into things in a place of our vulnerability and our authenticity, it opens up doors. And this is a solar eclipse, so there's going to be an illumination with our Venusian energy. She's going to want to make sure that we are really paying attention to how we show up in our bodies, what's getting illuminated, because remember, this is Taurus, Scorpio. It's like, this is what part of Venus's home territory. And while she's in Scorpio, which can make her a little snippy, you know, it's playing off the sun and the moon energy in Taurus and Scorpio as an access point. And Taurus is her home sign. She rules there. You know, Scorpio, she can be a little snippy, and that's okay. That's a part of the human spectrum. And remembering that we can hold all of it. And we don't want to just hold the good stuff, because if we only hold the good stuff, it limits how much good we can hold. Venus wants us to be in all of it. Well, Pluto really wants us to be in all of it, and he rules Scorpio. So to some extent, Venus is answering to Pluto, who is over in Capricorn. So back to building on our values and walking our talk.
Yeah. And that date of when Venus conjuncts the sun. Now this time she'll be on the far side. So she is on the other side of the sun, right? Furthest from us. She enters the underworld at this point. So she disappears from the sky for a few months, and then she will reappear as an evening star. So we'll see her in the evening after that. So that happens on October 22nd. And it actually happens at the very end of Libra. It happens at 29 degrees of Libra. So right before she leaves Libra, because that eclipse happens in early Scorpio, where she's at that point for the eclipse, she'll be in Scorpio. So she is in Libra though, her home sign, that's another. So she rules Taurus and Libra is a sign of relationships and our interaction with other, and equality and all of these pieces. But she's in the underworld at that point. So that is her midpoint of her phase when she conjuncts the sun on October 22nd. So that's why there's a lot going on, because Jupiter also comes back into Pisces at the end of October. So going back to this Venus piece though, she'll be in this conjunction with the sun, right? We can't see her in the sky. She's in the underworld, like in this complete, she's at the peak of her phase. She's completely vulnerable, exposed in the underworld. She is just in her transformative point. We can't see her in the sky. And then she enters Scorpio to be involved in that solar eclipse, which again is a new moon eclipse. So that means the sun, the moon, and Venus are all together. And so that feels really potent. It's at 2 degrees of Scorpio. And then just a few days later, so that's October 25th is the eclipse. And then a few days later, like I said, Jupiter, who likes to move during these eclipse portals this year, moves into Pisces on October 28th. So he gets to move back into his home sign of Pisces. He's had a good amount of time in Aries to get things going. But he moves back into Pisces, right? And he's on this deepening journey, this revisiting journey on the 28th. So I'll pause there so that we can.
I'm just going to make a plug for the Patreon. We love Venus here. We really love Inanna, and Venus and Inanna are really intertwined. It's $10. You can really go on a deep dive with us around the Venus and Inanna cycle, because what Alexis is talking about with Venus being in the underworld is the meat hook phase. She is stripped down bare of all of her power. She is the furthest she's going to be from Earth. She is hidden by the sun, and she's fallen apart to some extent. And she's falling apart in the most beautiful way. It is a breakdown to break through, to it's an initiation. It's the archetypal heroine's journey of how deeply in can I go? How much can I let go of so that I can reclaim what's actually mine? So just a little like, go pay $10. Listen to our Patreon.
Yeah,
it's good.
I know. I love that podcast because I keep having to I want to refer back to it because, right, like we go into so much depth there. So if you do want to, listen to that podcast, it's on our Patreon at the $10 tier, and it's a beautiful one. And you'll get lots of our exclusive podcasts. But I know that's I love it because she's on this journey. And so what happens on the other side of it is like, it's so rich. Like that myth is just so rich. So when she comes out on the other side, she's in her ascent. She's in that reclamation phase. She's an evening star. She's shining bright in the sky. So that all happens. That midpoint phase happens in October. We get Jupiter moving to Pisces, and then we get Mars retrograde on October 30th. So Mars, again, his cycles are a little bit slower. So he goes retrograde it's every 2 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
Yeah. He's got a 24 to 26 month cycle.
So we haven't had a Mars retrograde in a while. So this now
2020.
This now comes in at the end of the year, like as all this is happening, as we get this eclipse, right? It happens right in this eclipse energy, right between the two eclipses. So again, eclipse portal, like when stuff happens in that period, it just is like, pay attention. Like I have some stuff, right? Like how Jupiter is moving in during that time. It's just like, pay attention here.
Pay attention.
So that's what Mars is saying to me here. He's like, I'm moving retrograde during this eclipse portal. So he will be retrograde October 30th through January 12th, 2023 in Gemini. So again, his retrogrades are a little bit longer. And yeah, there's just a lot happening because then we have that next eclipse. So he'll be retrograde for the next eclipse as well, which is a lunar eclipse on November 8th in Taurus. So that'll be our last eclipse of the year. It's a full moon eclipse, November 8th at 16 degrees of Taurus. And that is the one that's conjunct Uranus. So that last eclipse is conjunct Uranus, so it's squaring Saturn, and it's also opposing Mercury, who will be in Scorpio. So I'll let you share because there's a lot there.
There's a lot there. I'm gonna just take us back to this Mars retrograde. One of the things I'm really loving that feels really supportive and beautiful about 2022 is we're starting 2022 with Venus retrograde, with the feminine on this interior journey. Retrograde is an interior journey. We're ending 22 with her lover, with the two we're bookend by the archetypal lovers, with him retrograde, with that masculine energy asking us to turn inward, for the masculine to take an archetypal heroine's journey, to go inside, to find a wholeness, to find a holistic way of being. So I'm loving those bookends. I know the tarot card for 2022 is the Lovers.
It is.
So
yeah.
that feels like, woo, there's a theme here, people.
Yeah. And especially because their cycle is unique, that they started with these three with triple conjunction.
Yes.
It doesn't happen every time. And that the tarot card for the year is the Lovers. Like, yes. Yes.
There's so much juiciness, and keeping in mind that when I talk about masculine and feminine, I am not talking about a male body or a female body. I'm speaking of energy signatures, and they're energy signatures that everything holds. Everything has a masculine thread of energy and everything has a feminine thread of energy. And when we bring those energies together, we get a sacred union and a wholeness. It's that amazing feeling of completeness that we can find inside of ourselves. And when we are complete inside of ourselves, it allows us to attract other complete, whole people, beings, opportunities into our world. If we are fractured, we can't do that.
And they are the polarity of the receptive and the taking action, and how all the time we are, that's in polarity to each other, and we are switching roles, right? Like sometimes it's about being receptive and sometimes it's about taking action and knowing when, right? Because we can push, we're really good at like trying to do the action part, because that's the part we can see. Like I want something, so I'm going to take action on it and moving forward. And that would be the more Mars or masculine component. And then the receptive, like our ability to receive and connect to ourselves, and that inward piece is very important too. And so that's a piece that when both of those are in healthy relationship, when they're in that healthy dance, we can feel into when is a time to be receptive and to let go and surrender, and when is a time to take action and move forward. And so those two, like to me, when they come together, it's like that is how creation happens, like within ourselves, how we create, whether it's projects or anything. It's that coming together of those two pieces. Because if we are just always in action, we won't be able to receive. And when we are just always in this flowing receptive place, we won't actually be able to move forward. Right. So it's both. And yeah, I do love that is true, that we start the year with the Venus retrograde, we end the year with a Mars retrograde, and that is the year of the Lovers. Like I think Mars and Venus will have a lot to share with us throughout the year, right? And we're touching on all of it, but they definitely have a big role to play.
How do we show up and make love to life?
Yeah, I love that. And how can we experience more of life?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. Like, how can we just experience even more? Because even that is infinite. Like the ability to experience more, to feel more, to have more joy and pleasure, right? Which also means the other side of it, to be able to be okay with experiencing the grief and like our connection to, like we talked about a lot earlier with death. And I also love how the noise stopped as soon as I mentioned this last eclipse with Uranus conjunct the eclipse. Like what I was like feeling into was like, it feels like that period of Uranus conjunct the North Node up to that last eclipse of the year. Like it feels like that energy, that just like noise.
Yeah.
That activating Uranus feels like it. But then it feels like this last eclipse really gets to bring it all home. Because then the noise stopped and it's like, okay, good, it's quiet.
I also love just a piece on the Mars retrograde. Mars is going to be retrograde in Gemini. The last time that happened was 1990. And that was when the idea of the World Wide Web was born. So this, Gemini is of the mind. It's an air sign. And this was Mars taking a journey inward and taking action on something in the unseen realms. So keeping in mind that the action we take in the unseen is just as vital and just as important as the actions we take in the seen realms. How much time we spend in the imaginal worlds, in our dreaming, like to pull from the Aboriginal, how much time are we spending in the dreaming? What kind of world do we want to dream into being? And to make that happen, we really have to clean up interiorly. So this Venus going retrograde, asking us to clean up our feminine. This Mars going retrograde, asking us to clean up our masculine. It just feels so potent and so delicious. And with Jupiter and Pisces, there's an expansion to it. There's a calling forth. I just lost my lighting. Thanks, Jupiter and Pisces.
Yeah, and as he moves into Pisces, he's only going to be there for a few months. So the end of October through the end of December. And I mean, also what's coming up is the way we doubt and the way we like hold ourselves back from like believing it's possible. Because we're not going to really get too far if we're just, in doubt. If we're doubting ourselves and like, talking about those great creators and inventors who, if they gave up on themselves, they wouldn't have created. And so it's also being aware of the doubt. Like, we take all of this and there's no judgment around all of it, but we take the doubt and we say, wow, that's interesting. Where is that coming from? And we have the awareness, because that's the thing is like all of this stuff is happening. But if we can have the awareness and we can have the like, the vantage point to like pause and be curious about things, that's, I feel like, another piece of that will help us on this wrapping up this Jupiter and Pisces piece, is like identifying the doubts and identifying where we hold ourselves back. And then he will station direct on November 23rd, the day of a new moon. So it's making a trine, which is a harmonious aspect. It's really beautiful to the sun and the moon. Like as Jupiter moves, everything he does is like very like, wow. It's like, look like, wow, that was very divinely orchestrated, all of this. Yeah. Like beautiful. That the day he goes direct and spends that last month from basically November and December, like moving forward through that very end of Pisces to come back into Aries. It's in this like harmonious trine to the sun and the moon. Like they like talking about polarity, like that is also the sun as a masculine and the moon as a feminine energy, like just really beautiful energy there to be like, yes, like it is possible. It is possible. And also that it's in Sagittarius, it's a new moon in Sagittarius, which is like this fiery, visionary, like explorer, like, again, like I think about like that explorer going on an expedition and it's like, I have no idea what's out there, but I'm going to go like explore new things and new possibilities. So that's just like, it's just so good. And then Jupiter enters Aries on December 20th. So again, he'll be direct at the end of Pisces for about a month, end of November through the end of December.
So good. I know one of my dear friends looked up, we were talking about 2022, and she looked up the meaning of the number, the numerology of the 2022. And 22 is the number that says the angels are holding you. So I just want to like keep in mind and invite everyone to keep in mind that we are so held. We are so provided for. We are so abundant. And yeah, shit's been rough. I'm not gonna like sugarcoat that. And oftentimes this is a honing. This is a calling us into our resilience, and it's a calling us to like, how can we be in community? How can we care for each other? I grew up in a world where I used to push back and say like, that is not fair. And my parents would say, well, life isn't fair. And I really, really deeply believe that it is our job as humans, if we are going to show up here, to work really diligently and really hard to create a world of fairness. Because the bottom line is that life, capital L, is life. She's going to do what she's going to do. There is death. And our little human self may look at that and say, that isn't fair. And the bottom line is it is happening for us. It is a gift. And if we want the world to be better, it is our jobs to show up and take care of everything around us, and not to the point of exhaustion or depletion, but to the point of we are infinitely abundant. And there is no reason to not share it. Zero.
Love it. And just to come back to Venus and Mars, since we've been following their journey, the last piece for the year for them is they're in opposition. Venus and Mars are opposite of each other on December 1st, and it's squaring the moon. So like I said, that last aspect where I talked about it was Venus and Mars squaring each other, and Mars was conjunct the moon. Now we have Venus and Mars opposite each other, squaring the moon. So the moon is very involved in this. But we have Venus in Sagittarius and Mars, who is retrograde in Gemini at this point. So they're opposite each other. So that is another dynamic of this cycle that we've been following. And it's kind of how they close out the year, is opposing each other, like being opposite each other, like very much that polarity. Like they are right across from each other, that feminine, masculine energy, and the moon is squaring all of it. Yeah.
It feels like there's a really big call. Scorpio is a very emotional sign when I feel it. Like Scorpio feels deeply. And the moon being involved in this, creating this T-square, like how are we gonna work with our feelings? How are we gonna grow up and mature into being able to meet ourselves in a better way?
Yeah, and to just look at that chart, so we have Venus and Mars opposite each other, Sagittarius and Gemini, and the moon. I knew I had to look at this for a reason. The moon is in Pisces next to Neptune and Jupiter, all within a few degrees of each other. Like I knew I had to pull it up for a reason. That's why. So the moon not only is it in a square to Venus and Mars, it's right next to that conjunction that we're like, to close out the year, that conjunction that we've been talking about is like a highlight of the whole year, to have the moon there, right in between, like sandwiched right in between Neptune and Jupiter. Yeah, it feels like there is just such a depth of potential for this year. And to close out the year with that aspect, like just before Jupiter moves out of Pisces, like, yeah, it's gonna be quite a year.
It's delicious, delicious stuff. I'm looking forward to 2022. I hope everyone else is. Check out our Patreon, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, for sure.